So this isn't getting talked about nearly enough. I think everybody is really focused on the weeds here. They're not seeing the big picture as far as roster construction goes coming out of this 2026 NFL draft. But the 49ers, and maybe it's because this has taken a little bit longer than the draft, but it's still ridiculously fast. The 49ers used over half of their original 2026 draft capital on the defensive line, and their D line has now been completely renovated in just two off seasons. You guys can see Nick Bosa and Chris Kasarik on that picture that I attached to my tweet that I just threw up on X. Bosa is the only 49ers primary rotational piece slated for this 2026 team that was on the 49ers just 2 seasons ago in 2024. The rotation is generally 8, 9 defensive linemen big. Even if you make it 10 big, all other guys outside of Nick Bosa are new in that defensive line. The 49ers have completely tore down that unit and rebuilt to where they are right now. Here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. And you guys can see here at the very top, the 49ers used the second-round pick this year on Romello Height. That is one of the best edge rushers in all of college football. We'll talk about him, and he's a light guy, but he plays with his hair on fire, and he's going to be a specialist rushing the passer on those drop-back situations. Then they used their third-rounder on Osa Odighizuwa. Of course, that happened about a month before the draft because that was a trade with the Dallas Cowboys, but still, it was draft capital for 2026 that the 49ers chose to cash in for a major position of need. They were not rushing the quarterback effectively, especially from the interior last year. Then the San Francisco 49ers used their fourth-round pick on Gracen Halton, another defensive tackle who's a lot like Osa Odighizuwa in that he's lighter. He is extremely spry for being near 300 pounds, and he rushes the passer better than he stops the run. Finally, the sixth-round pick, the reason the 49ers didn't have one this year is because they traded it to the New England Patriots for Keion White ahead of the deadline in 2025. But that was the 2026 sixth-round pick, and Keion was under contract for 2025 and 2026, still his rookie deal. So he's still around. He should be back healthy, ready to go, despite being shot in the ankle after the Super Bowl. So that's 4 out of 7 picks that the 49ers essentially spent on defensive linemen, maybe not in the draft per se, but 2 trades and 2 picks. And then they weren't done. After the draft, the 49ers also added Mikael Kamara, who's a very productive edge rusher out of Indiana. The reason that he wasn't drafted is because he's only 6 feet tall. But when he pinned his ears back a couple years ago in the 2024 season, he had 10 sacks for one of the best teams in college football. Then James Thompson out of Tennessee. This is a bigger defensive tackle. We're dealing with 2 defensive tackles now, James Thompson and Bryson Eason, who's a little bit lighter. James Thompson, is out of Illinois. Bryson Eason is out of the University of Tennessee. Those guys are going to have to fight to make the 49ers roster. But if you consider that the 49ers brought them in on top of Michael Williams last year, Alfred Collins in 2025, and CJ West, well, that's 3 plus 7. That's 10 new bodies that the 49ers have brought in, plus Sebastian Valdez, the Hulk, last offseason, right? So you could even say that's 11 new bodies that the 49ers have brought in that are still in the building right now. And they very, very much needed to do this. This defensive line in 2024 was bad with a capital B. They ranked number 29 in the entire league against the run to finish the 2024 season. And a lot of people were all up in arms over the course of last offseason when they started cutting veterans, right? Leonard Floyd, gone. Malik Collins, gone. Javon Hargrave, gone. And people were like, well, why are they cutting veterans? Well, it's because those were underperforming veterans relative to their price tag. Somebody like Leonard Floyd was going to make about $10 million. So was Malik Collins. Javon Hargrave was going to make even more for the 49ers. And they were all part of a run defense that finished damn near last in the NFL. So there was a recognition after the 2024 season that the 49ers had to tear this down all the way down to the very foundation. Like, keep what is going to allow this unit to be strong moving forward, but purge everything else. And Nick Bosa was the 49ers foundational pillar that they decided to keep around. Foundational pillars on my depth chart, I keep highlighted in yellow, as you can see here. The 49ers have, of course, the foundational pillar of Bosa on their defense. They've got the pillar of Warner, and they've got the pillar of Diameter Lenore. Load-bearing walls for each of the rooms of the house, right? They're trying to build a big mansion. Over the course of this offseason, they have managed to add yet another foundational pillar in Osa Odighizuwa. Because, you know, a lot of trades, you'll trade for a year or two of contractual control of a player. For Osa Odighizuwa, I'm going to get more into this trade over the course of this week. The 49ers were able to get all but 1 year of a newly signed extension with the Dallas Cowboys. He's under contract for 2026, for 2027, and for 2028. They've got a full 3 years of team control. He signed 4 years, $80 million with the Cowboys, and well, the 49ers were essentially able to capitalize on the Cowboys' poor planning because they traded for 2 other defensive tackles in Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams, and then Osa was a surplus item, and the 49ers were able to get him for that 3rd-round pick, 3 years of team control, and they don't have to pay the signing bonus either, which is big because Dallas already paid it. So they were able to go ahead and restructure Osa Odighizuwa's contract. He's carrying a salary cap hit of only $1.7 million this year. To give you some more perspective, back to the depth chart here. The 49ers defensive tackles, so these positions right here, though 0, 1, and 3 techniques, last season combined for 56 pressures. Combined. This was a team that was not pressuring the quarterback. Osa Odighizuwa, who has a cap hit of only $1.7 million this season, had 52 pressures alone for the Cowboys last year. So Osa Odighizuwa, I think, immediately bolsters the 49ers pass rush in a massive needed way. He's going to play that 3 technique position at, you know, the smaller defensive tackle, the guy that's going to be relying on his athleticism to rush the passer. And then the 49ers immediately said, we've got to back that up. We've got to back it up with another pass rusher. And that's why they drafted Gracen Halton in the 4th round. Now, Halton has got the 36.5-inch vertical leap. That's the 3rd highest of a defensive tackle ever at the NFL Combine. He doesn't have long arms, right? So he's extremely explosive, historically so, but he's below average when it comes to some of the dimensions, the measurements, right? And that's why he slipped until the 4th round. But the 49ers aren't asking him to be a 3-down guy, even though I think that he might have the capability of doing that. He actually was decent against the run over limited snaps at Oklahoma. But Gracen Halton is going to be asked to get after the quarterback for the 49ers so they can come in waves so that Osa Odighizuwa doesn't have to be out there on every single down. This is following the 2025 editions of Alfred Collins, of Michael Williams, of CJ West, all of whom are big-time run stoppers. So they were number 29 against the run, and they basically fired everybody but Nick Bosa, leaving 2024. Yetur Gross-Matos stayed 2, but that was because he had a 2-year deal, had only 1 year left. So they purge a lot of this roster, if not most of it, on the defensive line side, leaving 2024 because they sucked on run defense. They started rebuilding around Nick Bosa with Michael, with Alfred Collins, with CJ West. The early returns on those guys were very promising. Unfortunately, Michael Williams tore his ACL, but he drew the 4th highest double team rate of all edge rushers in football last year. So you got so many casuals worried about, oh, this guy sacks, this and that. The plan wasn't to draft Michael Williams and get a bunch of sacks, at least right away. The plan was to draft Michael, play the 5 technique, stop the run, pair with some really big defensive tackles. Michael Williams, by the way, was only 20 when they drafted him, so they figured he would really, really grow into his body and grow into his abilities as a pass rusher, but they knew that he could set the edge against the run and then work against the inside. So that was the plan when you got him, to fortify what was weakest in 2024 with the trio of rookies in the 2025 draft class. The 2 defensive tackles were absolute behemoths last year, right? And Alfred Collins and CJ West. 320 plus pounds Nobody was looking at those two guys and saying, okay, these guys are stalwart pass rushers. They're looking at them as either fire hydrants or just complete bulldozers against the run. Like, you had to stop the bleeding against the run. That was the first thing this 49ers defense had to do. And they accomplished that with many of their moves in 2025. Now, we didn't see this come to full fruition on the field because everybody got hurt in 2025. That was the big problem. But when Michael was healthy, the 49ers had a top 6 run defense. They're number 6 in run defense EPA. When Michael was gone, they had the number 26 run defense. So when Michael Williams was available for the 49ers last year, they had largely solved their run defense issues. So then they turned to this offseason. They said, okay, we're going to get Michael back. Alfred Collins is going to be coming back off of shoulder surgery. CJ West surged to close 2025. Keion White, they liked him as a Michael Williams kind of backup. He's got a very similar skill set. Stop the run on base downs, move inside on those other downs. Well, they're going to get Keion White back for another year. The 49ers said, we're good with these edge setters and with these big defensive tackles to stop the run. Why don't we move on to adding the pass rushers, since we only had 20 sacks last offseason? So the 49ers started by trading for Osa Odighizuwa. They immediately doubled their expected pressure rate from the inside. They weren't getting any pressure from the 3 technique. They continue with Gracen Halton. Mike, if you can send me the video of Halton and the vertical jump from the NFL, maybe we can go back to that. That's just too good. And of course, since Bryce Huff retired over the offseason, and I think this could have been a move even if Bryce Huff hadn't retired, because they might have traded Bryce to Tennessee, they drafted Romello Height in the 2nd round. And they have comped Romello Height to Dee Ford. And that's a good comp. Now, let's hope that the injury history is not the same. I don't think it is. Height played a long time in college, played for 5 different schools. He put up a lot of numbers. And the issue with Dee Ford is that when the 49ers acquired him, he's already dealing with back issues. And obviously, those would end up compromising his entire career, and he had to retire. But the get-off that Dee Ford had was unbelievable. At Auburn, then with the Kansas City Chiefs, sometimes a little too quick because he was flagged for offsides. With Romello Height, the get-off is awesome, but I think that the way that he pursues the quarterback, pursues ball carriers, if he somehow gets stuck in there on rundowns, I'll keep on bringing this up. The whatever it takes score, the WIT score, Romello Height, the 49ers front office or their scouting department assigns this every year. Height scored at the very, very top of every single draft prospect that the 49ers evaluated in terms of the WIT, whatever it takes score, because of the way that he plays with his hair on fire. Earlier today, I talked about the 49ers first round draft pick, or their first draft pick, not the first rounder. He was in the pick number 33, 2nd round, first pick of the second day, Dejon Stribling. And I mentioned his dad was an ex-Marine, 17 years in the Marine Corps, and that discipline was really passed down on Dejon Stribling. Well, it just so happens that the 2nd pick of this 49ers draft, a number 70 for Romello Height, he also has a dad who was a Marine, and he also has some intense discipline with the way that he plays football. And he's 25 years old too, so he's mature, and I'm going to get into the age in a little bit. I think that makes Romello Height one of those targets that the 49ers want to be ready-made. They want him to play right away, because with Huff retiring, the 49ers need that speed rusher to step in immediately. And Height is going to be part of a NASCAR package that features Bosa on one side, Osa Odighizuwa and Michael Williams in the middle, and Romello Height as the bookend with the speed rush. And Height also, on Bryce Huff, we saw the experiment in Philadelphia not work out. What's going to happen with the 49ers is that Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator, is going to try to drop his defensive ends in coverage a little bit more often than we've seen in the past. I don't want to say the 49ers are going to run a 3-4, but I do think they're going to run way more 5-man fronts. They're probably going to up from 8% to 20% in terms of 5-man fronts, and that's a good way to try to stop the run. And the 5-man fronts, which Morris has run at previous stops, are going to entail defensive ends standing up more often. And if defensive ends are standing up more often, they're going to drop into coverage a little bit more often. And that's a skill set that isn't necessarily, you don't pick that up just getting out of bed, especially if you've been in a system that's been running 4-3 for a long time. Bryce Huff came from the New York Jets to the Philadelphia Eagles. And with the Jets, he had been with Robert Saleh, and he was pinning his ears back, putting his hand in the dirt, getting around the edge, and just trying to close games against quarterbacks. And he thrived there, and he earned the money from the Philadelphia Eagles. But that was a Fangio-style system, and they put him in a 3-4, and he was an outside linebacker. And all of a sudden, the reading and reacting and the coverage drops. It just and an injury that year too just wasn't the right fit for Bryce Huff. So he was traded to the 49ers. It was a great fit until Nick Bosa got hurt, and then he had to start doing too much again. So Bryce Huff retired. You wonder if Raheem Morris had taken over a defensive coordinator and had Bryce Huff not retired, had those two things gone together, you wonder if Bryce Huff would have fit Morris's vision because of how he struggled doing some of the extra stuff in Philadelphia. Remember Raheem Morris's lineage, right? It's been everywhere, it seems. He's been Tampa too. He's been with Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan coaching on offense. But another spot that is at the very top of his resume is he was the Rams defensive coordinator after Brandon Staley. And Brandon Staley is a Vic Fangio disciple. So Raheem Morris is perhaps his best defenses. I would say definitely his best defenses. He's had a lot of talent in LA. His best defenses were cut from the Vic Fangio, Brandon Staley cloth. That's the same defense that the Philadelphia Eagles were running when Bryce Huff didn't fit. Okay, so does this all make sense? Like, if Raheem Morris is going to be bringing principles over from a Fangio, Brandon Staley type of defense, which I think he will to the 49ers for the defensive ends, I don't think that Bryce Huff would have been a match given how we saw that not work in Philadelphia. I would not have been surprised to see the 49ers trade Bryce Huff to the Titans. Either way, they probably would have been in the market for an edge rusher with speed because you need that whatever scheme you run, but somebody was more comfortable dropping in coverage, and I think that is Romello Height. Fascinating in that he played 6 seasons of college football, 5 different colleges, began at Auburn. Romello Height went through USC. I mean, it's crazy how many different schools this guy went through until he finally ended up at Texas Tech. But when you look at DeJon Stribling, when you look at Height, when you look at the third round pick in Keion Black, the 49ers day 2 picks all went through the transfer portal NIL gamut in college football. And I made this point yesterday, and I've made it on X, and I'm going to make it again. All of these guys have been paid to play football for a while. They're all older. Romello Height's 25 years old. It used to be that you didn't draft older players, but I think that the 49ers are looking at this as, this is a win-now situation. We're going to use the draft, since it's different now with NIL and the transfer portal. Older players, guys staying in college, guys who've been to 5 different schools, have been paid almost the entire way. They've had to compete for money. This guy, Romello Height's ready to play right now. He's not a 20, 21-year-old edge rusher. He is a 25-year-old grown man who's earned paychecks playing football already, who's competed at multiple different schools and slightly different schemes. Now they're going to put him on the edge, and they're also going to ask him to zone drop in certain situations to satisfy the new defensive requirements of Raheem Morris. And I view all of this as just fascinating strategy for the 49ers. The only way that they've been able to completely rebuild this defensive line in just 2 off seasons is because the draft has that different dynamic now with NIL. Because now, especially this past year, with the additions of Height and Halton, but I think especially Height, since he's 25 years old, you can expect a player who can contribute immediately. Versus other years, yeah, Mykel Williams was special, first-round pick, so you expect him to contribute immediately. But it took Alfred Collins and it took C.J. West a little extra time last year, and they had to be patient last year, right? They knew entering 2025 that it was going to be about patience for this defensive line. I think entering 2026, there is now the ramp-up year is behind the 49ers. The retool year is behind them. They won 13 games. It's time to push the chips in. They've done it on the offensive end with Mike Evans. I think they've done it to some degree on the defensive end with Dre Greenlaw. And now they, in a different way, have done it with their draft picks used on Osa Odighizuwa, a trade, one used last year on Keion White, and now a second rounder used on a 25-year-old Romello Height. I mean, think about football. The average career length in the NFL is only about, 3 years? The male athletic prime is considered to be 28 or 29 years old. 30 is thought of as the age where you hit a wall, right? You look at any professional sport, but football, especially, you look at guys on the wrong side of 30 and on the right side of 30. Romello Height is going to have a 4-year contract thanks to the NFL rookie wage scale. The 49ers, since they drafted him at age 25, get him 25 to 29. So they get him to the very end of what is his supposed athletic peak. It will take, I think, something remarkable, actually, for the 49ers to extend Romello Height beyond that. I think they drafted him okay with him playing out this rookie contract, which is cost controlled, filling in at that exact edge rusher position and giving the 49ers precisely what they need, plug and play. And that's how this 2026 draft class rounded out the 49ers big time defensive line reconstruction. So give John Lynch credit for being able to get this done in just 2 off seasons. Again, here's my post up on X. They used over half of their original 26 capital on the D-line. These undrafted free agents are really interesting to me as well because they were productive defensive tackles in college, and Mikhail Kamara was a very productive defensive end. There's a non-zero chance that one of these 3 guys makes it, plus the 49ers had the practice squad, plus you want to come in waves. I mean, what has happened is that we've seen this go from a paper-thin defensive line to a D-line that potentially can come in waves, and that, final wave can even include the practice squad. Now, it's going to depend on how some of these guys pan out, of course. But Osa Odighizuwa has already proven himself. Keion White is a relatively known commodity in this league. Nick Bosa's got to come back from that injury for the 49ers. Michael Williams has to come back off the ACL. Keion White is coming off getting shot in the ankle. Collins and CJ West have to take that next step. And then you look at the guys like a Gracen Halton. Then you look at the guys like a James Thompson and the Mikhail Kamaras of the world, the undrafted free agents. I think it's an excellent time right now to show you the Gracen Halton vertical leap. I know I led a video with this the other day, but this is history. 36.5 inches for somebody who's 293 pounds. Yay! That is awesome. We could even rewind. I did this the other day and just here, I want to stop it mid-leap. I'm having trouble because he really, really levitates right there. He's not. Maybe we'll get lucky by hitting the pause button. That's not quite here. One more try. Mid-flight. I got it. There's Gracen Halton, 49ers new defensive tackle. 36.5 inches, the 3rd highest vertical leap of all time at that position at the NFL Combine. Now, again, he's got shorter arms, so I don't know if you want him in there on a down in, down out basis. I don't know if he's going to be a great run defender down in, down out, but that's why you've got, this is a team. That's why you've got guys specializing in different roles. That's why Alfred Collins is here at 320 plus. That's why CJ West is around at 320 plus. That's why Michael Williams is such a good run defender. You set the table for your pass rushers by defending the run. That's something the 49ers didn't do in 2024. That's why they cut Malik Collins. That's why they cut Leonard Floyd. That's why they cut Javon Hargrave. If you can't stop the run, you're not going to have any fun rushing the passer. All right, I'm going to open this up to some questions. Thank you, Kurt. Kurt says, thanks for the realistic coverage of the draft. You're the only voice in the 49ers worth listening to. Well, that makes me both happy and sad at the same time. I'm sad that the discourse out there has gone so far off the rails that I'm the only one that you can listen to. But yeah, when you got people advocating that the 49ers should trade Fred Warner and that the team that has the 2nd or 3rd highest winning percentage in football over the course of the past decade somehow is terrible at acquiring players. Like, people just aren't living in reality. And I think that we like to live in reality on this channel. And for that, I think we have the most viewers out of anybody by quite a bit. And you got good guys like Kurt who helps me get a beer whenever I might need a beer. So thank you, Kurt. I really, really appreciate it. Waiting for some more questions. Where do the 49ers fall on the waiver pickup list? How does it work? Well, it just depends on how they finished last year. So they won 12 games in the regular season, made it to the playoffs, won a game. They picked 27, right? They traded down, I get it, but they started at 27 and they dropped down into 30 and then to 33. And that 27th pick is going to be their waiver claim order. So it's as simple as that. You're not going to trade down out of the waiver claim order. That's impossible. But their draft pick order will be their waiver claim order once that comes around in the 2026 cycle. Now, guys can get waived now, I guess, but it's going to be an issue. And I think during the regular season, at one point, I think it's after the trade deadline, the waiver order changes to your current record during that season. But that is not the case yet for the 49ers. They're going to be number 27 to start the season. Somebody asked me how fatherhood is. It has started well. I'm going to go up and check on everybody after this show. So we got a few more minutes to go, but as you can tell, the beard is out. We've been a lot more hanging out at home, chilling this off season. I definitely didn't sleep that first week, and I still managed to cover an NFL draft on no sleep, only hallucinated a few times. And I think that we're starting to hit our rhythm now, so things are getting a little bit easier. What's the current salary cap space? I'll be honest with you, I have to do the calculations before I get something completely firm for you, but I can get something semi-firm for you. We can open it up right now because Kurt is a good guy. And so we need to see what Trent Williams' new cap hit is. I'm going to see if that's in yet, actually, on Over the Cap. This might be the first time that you hear Trent Williams' new number. No, it's not in there yet. It's still 46.3 million on Over the Cap, but what's going to happen is he's redone his deal. This is going to lower to about, I would say, let's say 24 million. And as soon as that happens, that will open up, as you can see here, it's going to be close to 50 million in space for the 49ers. I have to account for the draft class, but not fully because I've already done most of this with my math. I can explain that later. I would say somewhere between 40 and 45 million for San Francisco, and they're going to want to carry over at least 30 and also keep room for in-season trades since they are going for it very clearly this year. So that's where the 49ers are. Plenty of money, but also not a lot of room on this roster. I mean, you look up and down the roster, maybe the most likely place they make a trade might be safety for Jesse Bates, maybe ahead of the deadline. You got to keep some money open in case you do that. But there's a reason why they said it's going to be tough for all 8 of these picks to make the roster because it is one that is packed to the gills right now. It is a strong roster. They won all those games last year despite not being at their very best. Despite having to dig far into the depth, they should be back to health here in 2026. And the setup is going to be there for the 49ers to try to really cram some final talent into that roster. But I think they've already tried to do the majority of that work. Now it's just going to depend on how the season flows moving forward for the 49ers. Curious to know what the drawback is to the strategy deferring money to the future. It doesn't catch up if you do it sustainably. And I think that the 49ers and the Eagles figured this out before the rest of the league, and now the league is starting to catch up. But with how the NFL salary cap is rising because the NFL is so wealthy and getting wealthier, the inflation is something that you could ride sustainably. So as long as you structure the contracts correctly and only do it for players where it makes sense, right? If you start going overboard, well, then 1 year you're not going to be able to restructure any more money to bring the salary cap hit down. And then the only way that you're going to be able to bring it down is to cut players. So it's, we've seen teams run out of rope pushing money into the future, but the Eagles and the 49ers have not really run out of rope because they try to stay ahead of it. That's why they run their salary cap cleanses. And those are the two teams that have pursued this strategy most aggressively. So good question. And it's a game of, you feel it out and you're never really sure what the salary cap is going to be. So far, the 49ers have been very, very, I think, adept with how they've maneuvered this. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. Half an hour is good. The 49ers in an insanely fast D-line rebuild. Hit that sub button. We'll talk to you soon.